started. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thanks for joining Moravian Ministries Foundation and our Tools for Trustees. We really want this call to provide any church board member or anyone really within the church an overview of our services. I'm Chris Spaugh. I'm the President and CEO of Moravian Ministries Foundation. I'm going to ask my co-host to introduce themselves. So, Laura.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, everybody. Laura Watson, Vice President and Director of Programs for the Foundation.
And I'm Vince Holbrook. I am the Director of Communication and Marketing.
We're glad to have all of you with us today. As Laura said a few times, if you haven't done so, please put your name and where you're from in the chat so we capture everyone that's on the call and also know the geography you're coming in from today. Please ask your questions along the way. Do that through the chat feature. We'll be monitoring the chat feature throughout the call today. Just put your calls or your questions there and we'll try to address them as we go along. We are, of course, recording the webinar. The slides, all the links, and the recording will be shared with you after the call today. You'll also get a survey, and very important in the survey, please take the time to respond to that. Let us know what you thought of the call, but also give us your suggestions for future training opportunities and future calls we could do with you. So with that, Vince, you're going to go through our outline for today.
Yes, thank you, Chris. We're going to talk about the 5 different areas where MMFA provides service to Moravian congregations and agencies today. And the 5 areas are investment management, gift facilitation, stewardship services, gift planning, and grant funding for ministry. So we're going to start with Chris, who's going to tell you about investment management.
All right, I get to talk about investment management. Of course, the centerpiece of our investment management is the Moravian Common Fund. So with that, why would you invest in the Common Fund? What we really mean by this is why would you choose MMFA instead of 1-800-brokers or the guy down the street or maybe someone who manages your personal money? Why us? The first key point in that is your investment fees stay within the church. Everything MMFA does, including the other services you're going to hear about today, are paid for by our investors. In other words, the investment fees on the Common Fund go to provide everything else we do. MMFA receives no money from provincial support. We don't get part of your provincial share or your church assessment. None of that money comes to our foundation like some other agencies that do get that kind of support. We're totally funded by our investment fees. And examples in what we provide, of course, are the services you're going to hear about today, but it also enables us to do things like pay the processing fees for the giving portal, to have the infrastructure in place to run that service, to provide stewardship services to churches, to do grant making, to put some of our own money in things like our field of interest funds that in turn make grants to our churches and agencies. The second bullet point there is institutional continuity. Church boards change over time. For many of you, your church board changes every year, some portion of that. Our foundation structure doesn't change. We may have staffing changes, but for the most part, we have continuity. We have records, we have documentation on how different funds, different interactions with the churches have gone, and we have a paper trail and a historical record of those accounts and relationships. We're really in it for the long term. Sometimes the institutional memory in a church is relatively short, and board members are very quick to say, well, I don't remember how that went. We don't get to do that here at the foundation, and we provide that record for you. The last 2 bullets on this slide are related. There's power in numbers. As a lone investor, Moravian congregations would have to go through a lot of red tape, paperwork to create investment accounts with a commercial provider. Certainly, we make that much easier on the part of the churches, but you also would not be able to invest in certain things. You would pay higher fees as an individual investor. Because the brothers and sisters around the country invest together in a common way, we're able to go to market really as a large investor and provide some products that the typical individual could not get or participate in. So there is a level of clout getting to invest with your brothers and sisters in the common fund. The next slide illustrates our different investment options. We now have 7 investment options. This slide illustrates kind of the longest term return versus the shortest term return, also the highest level of risk versus the lowest level of risk. So everything from growth, which is a highly diversified portfolio, down to our stable fund, which is essentially cash and cash equivalents. Now, the stable fund is new for us, so I'm going to go into that in more detail. I'll also cover in more detail our ESG options because those are still relatively new and we've had some recent changes to those. 78% of the funds we manage are in our growth portfolio. So if you look at this chart, you can kind of see that because a lot of church funds are true endowments. So an endowment should be invested for the longest term with the highest return potential. So that's why, almost 80% of what we manage is in the growth allocation. We've had name changes to a couple of these portfolios. So those of you that have been with the Common Fund for a number of years, the hybrid pool is the former growth and income pool. And then income and growth, we just simply call income now. We did that to eliminate some multi-use of the same word and also make it a little clearer what that portfolio is. The next slide actually talks about more in depth our stable fund. And again, this is our newest option, cash and cash equivalents. So this is really if you needed a place to park cash reserves for your church, or you had an amount of money that you knew was going to be used in the relative short term, say 1 to 2 years, you didn't want to expose it to market risk. This is an option for you. This is, again, cash equivalents. What is that? So within this portfolio, there's a mix of CDs, there's a mix of treasuries, some commercial paper, some time deposits. The yield on this portfolio as of the end of March was 4.87%. So 4.87 is pretty great, even by today's standards, for institutional liquid money. This is totally, if you needed this money, you could take it back out. You're not locking it up like you would with a CD. This is truly, give us 2 days, we get you the money back. This is a great option for cash. We've wanted to have a cash solution for a long time and just have not been able to do that. We now can do that with the stable fund. So most churches have some form of cash reserve, either a month or 2 that's sitting there. Really strong cash churches may have 6 months of cash that's just blocked for emergencies. This is a great solution for that if you have that within your church. On the next slide, you see the new allocations for all of our investment pools. All of our investments going into 2023 have tilted slightly more conservative, less equities in the portfolio, just because of the equity market concerns about a recession this year. Bonds are suddenly more attractive. They're paying a higher return. All of that played into the structure of these portfolios. So this compares, all right, if you wanted to see growth, how much equity is in growth versus how much equity is in income, that's what the slide illustrates. Again, these numbers will move through time depending on the economic outlook and recommendations of our investment managers. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about ESG investing. All investments create impact. Guided by faith and customs of the Moravian Church, what MMFA is seeking to do is manage some portfolios to improve our community, improve the world around us, and do that in a Moravian way. We formed a focus group earlier this year and toward the end of last year to really look at what is the Moravian definition of ESG. And if ESG is new to you, that stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it involves screening in many ways, either companies that are doing poorly or doing really great. But what does that look like in the Moravian context? If you ask 100 Moravians what ESG is to them, you might get 100 different answers. So we were able with our focus group to look at that and really go through and find where there were similarities. We ultimately determined to focus that we had similar focuses in certain areas. One was diversity and inclusion. That's proactively investing in companies that are inclusive across all natures of their business, both with employees and stakeholders. The other key area of focus was environmental stewardship. Moravians largely care about the environment, and what we want to do is avoid poor performers in terms of who we choose to invest in. We also came up with a fair number of prohibitions where there were similarities across the country. Child labor is one of those areas. All Moravians seem to think that's bad. Avoiding that, all of you on the call would probably agree with that today. So we don't want to invest in any businesses that are not attuned to protecting our children. The other prohibition would be gambling. We really don't want to invest in anything that reinforces addictive behaviors. Pornography is a prohibition, staying away from any companies that derive more than 1% of their revenue from any type of pornography. You have to leave the 1% in there because even retail companies like Walmart and larger firms may sell something, but again, it's not more than 1% of their revenue. Substance abuse is another area we want to avoid. Altogether, we're not going to invest in companies that generate income from harmful substances. And then focusing on companies that have a positive screen toward world poverty. They're tuned in to try and alleviate that. And at the same time, we don't want to invest in companies that turn a blind eye to that. So we essentially slotted our preferences into the three areas you see on this slide: improving lives, inclusive workplace, climate, natural resource solutions. The next slide gives you a little bit more detail into each of these, and you start to see these little color boxes. What those boxes represent is work the United Nations did back in 2015. They brought world leaders together and really wanted to define sustainable development goals for 2030. So we're 7 years away from 2030, but what they wanted to accomplish with those development goals is essentially protecting the world, or laying a path to protect the world against poverty, protect the planet, ensuring that we're going to have a sustainable planet that's protected, prosperity for all countries equally across the board, both by the private sector and civil sector. So the world leaders came up with 17 sustainable development goals. We're focusing on 6 of those. You see those by the color boxes on the screen. So under improving lives, the 2 that get picked up there are zero hunger. Hunger is a solvable problem. We want to do everything we can with investments in the ESG space to promote that. Food security, improved nutrition, sustainable agriculture, and just trying to end hunger in general. Quality education is the other one listed there. What that is ensuring inclusive quality education for all people, all countries, and promoting lifelong learning among those groups. Issues of concern in the improving lives category are human rights, private prisons, and also weapons or firearms would be issues of concern in that category. Within the inclusive workplace category, you see gender equality there. What's represented by that is essentially achieving gender equality by empowering women and girls. So you're going to focus on companies that are diverse, that have a diverse board, that have women in leadership. Reduced inequalities, what that means is basically across different countries. Is there discrimination from certain people groups? We want to make sure we're not investing in companies that do business in those countries. For the climate, natural resource area, the 2 focus groups there, Affordable and clean energy and climate action. So affordable and clean energy, again, that's sustainable energy, modern energy for everybody, for every country around the globe, and taking action with climate action just to reduce our footprint on the world. Issues of concern under climate action include, of course, oil and gas, poor performers in regards to environmental stewardship. So that's a little bit on the common fund and our investment management solutions. If you have more questions, certainly reach out during the call, or remember, you can put your questions in the chat feature. Vince is going to talk to us about gift facilitation, which is our next service. So Vince?
Thank you, Chris. Gift facilitation is the second service that we provide, and I'll talk about three aspects of gift facilitation. One is that we are here to help you convert gifts that you receive that are non-cash in nature into usable funds. So the first aspect is conversion of assets when received as a gift. The second is using the tools of philanthropy to make smarter gifts. And when I say the tools of philanthropy, I'm simply meaning various kinds of funds that can be structured to make gifts smart and more useful to you. And then the third area is our online giving service, which is the giving portal, which provides an online giving service to all Moravian agencies and congregations. We cover all the card processing fees, and there is no charge to either the donor or the recipient for that service. Imagine, if you will, with me, that it's December 29th and your wealthiest member of your congregation or patron of your agency has decided that she needs to make a gift of stock or property. Is anybody going to be in your office to take that call? Odds are you might miss that opportunity. But we are here, and that's a service that we provide, and we know what to do in situations like this. Now, this might sound like a very obscure and unlikely situation, but the truth is that 12% of all giving happens in the last 3 days of the year. So I ask you, if you're representing a particular church or congregation, what is the state? What if this did happen in your congregation? Would somebody know, first of all, be there to answer the phone or take that call or respond? And second, if they did, would they know what to do? So we do that. We are also a neutral party for complex gifts that might involve multiple recipients. So there are some things that you can do, and we'll talk about links and ways you can communicate with your members so that you don't have to have somebody in the office on December 9th. You can direct them to us because we are here to help you with that. Another aspect of our gift facilitation is the tools of philanthropy, the various kinds of funds that we can structure for a donor have beneficial effects for all parties involved, the donor and the recipient. These tools can optimize and minimize taxation for the donors and the recipients. They can encourage earlier giving during life because we can structure various kinds of funds that will provide an income stream for the person during life, or in the case of a donor advised fund, we can structure a fund that lets them go ahead and make that gift and see the joy, experience the joy by making or recommending grants during their life. So there are various ways that these tools or different kinds of funds can make a gift more joyful for both the donor and recipient and smarter. We can also help donors recognize that some assets they have may not be doing anything for them and will not actually be needed for their own care. So we can help donors assess such gifts and put them to work for doing good. And we can also foster the discussions with donors that help make sure that the gifts that they structure are as useful as they possibly can be to the recipient. For example, many churches tell us that they get lots of funds restricted for the graveyard upkeep or whatever. And those restrictions are troublesome in some cases, but we can work with donors to help them provide gifts that have minimal restrictions or restrictions that are necessary or meaningful to the donor. Our giving portal, I hope that you all are familiar with that. It is a service that we provide at no charge to the church or donors. There's no charge to congregations. We pay all the card processing fees for the donor. We acknowledge those gifts and provide the tax receipts. And we send you a report that details those gifts, who made the gifts, unless they have indicated it's an anonymous gift. So you can still keep up with things like, progress towards a pledge made or giving records there, but you don't have to provide all the acknowledgments and so forth. We have certain events that we promote that encourage giving in general, and congregations and agencies are the recipients of the beneficiaries of those events, such as the Moravian Day of Giving. We also encourage giving on Giving Tuesday, and special occasions like Mother's Day and Father's Day. We encourage people to make a gift in memory or honor of someone, and churches are the beneficiaries of those promotions.
Hey, Vince, before we go on to stewardship, Carol had a question.
Okay.
She says she loves the online giving updates, and any chance you are considering making it possible for donors to set up an account to see their donations? Do you want me to try to take that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Carol, we are actually we're evaluating a systems enhancement for all of the services here within MMFA, but we have the giving portal front of mind with that, and that would be something we probably would look to do toward the end of 2023 into 2024. It would have that functionality. We would probably roll that out in phases. That's a little bit of a double-edged sword, so to speak, because even though the donors get the ability to log in, then our staff becomes the password reset kings, where we get calls having to reset passwords and manage that. So we'll have to manage that delicately, but the system we are evaluating would have that functionality.
I just want to say again, I mean, I know I put it in the chat, but for anybody to hear, your upgrades, just allowing the flexibility that you've allowed so far with the online giving and the fact that you cover the cost is phenomenal to me. Absolutely phenomenal. I thank you.
Great. Thanks for that feedback. All right. Thanks, Vince.
All right. And now Laura is going to talk to us about stewardship services.
Thanks, Vince. So our third area of service that we want to share with you about today is our stewardship service. I want to start actually with a verse of scripture, and then this comes from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. This passage says, "For we are what he has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life." So how does this verse speak to stewardship, and why is it important for MMFA's stewardship services? Well, it tells us that stewardship is about a lot more than money, which may be something that in your church people think of when they hear the word stewardship. They think of money. But Ephesians is telling us that stewardship is more than just money, and it's more than what we're doing even at our church. It's a way of life. It's our identity. Created us to be stewards, to care for everything that God's entrusted to us. And then as God's stewards, we are using our lives to reflect God's love and generosity and who we are and all we do. So our stewardship service is grounded in this theology. We want to help you form and nurture faithful and generous stewards in your ministry setting. And we do this by partnering with you in several ways to discern your community of faith, unique culture and core rhythms, and then together to work on a multi-year plan that encompasses all aspects of church life and puts that stewardship lens on everything that you're doing. We believe that having a pastor and leaders in the church, leaders like you who are with us today, who are willing to set a tone and fully embrace significant change is really critical for a stewardship effort to be sustainable and effective. So you'll see here that our first goal is to shape leaders. How do we do this? Well, we work again together with you to identify ways to weave stewardship into the church's culture. We connect clergy and laity to share best practices around stewardship. A lot of times we hear from folks that you want to learn from one another, what's working at this church, what's not working at this church, and we can make this connection to help form your leadership practices. We also take steps to help you decrease your own fear and anxiety around money, as well as that of the people in your congregation. We share resources that we have and from our ecumenical and other partners. And then we offer some financial training that's specific for clergy and church leaders, knowing that the better relationship that you all have with money, the more able you are to lead stewardship efforts with finances in your congregation. So then you'll see our second goal is to educate believers. What does this mean? We want to educate people in your community of faith about stewardship. So we facilitate workshops, webinars, like the one you all are part of right now, that help people have a holistic understanding of biblical stewardship. We connect you with other educational resources. We lead the congregation through structured processes to identify resources and assets that are important to your ministry. And then we help individuals, congregations, and agencies envision and clarify their future ministries. You're going to invite people to give time, talent, treasure. But what does that mean? What is that going to help you do? We can help you clarify that and educate your folks about that. And then we also help you assess the feasibility of different ministry options that you have available to you. And then our final goal is to develop a holistic, sustainable stewardship ministry. It's not just a program or a campaign. It's more than just an annual financial appeal. A thriving stewardship ministry focuses on gifts of time, talent, testimony, and treasure throughout the year. So we want to help you look at what you're doing or not doing in the area of stewardship with fresh eyes. Look at your congregation's gifts. How are they being used and how are they making a difference? Do they see that? How do they know that? We work with you to create, again, a year-round plan that incorporates those congregational gifts, enhances connections in your ministry and beyond. We include communication strategies, and then we also want to make sure you're connecting everything you're doing with stewardship with the church's mission and vision for the future. And then finally, we're going to help you learn best practices for investing and budgeting and planned giving. At the bottom of this slide, you see 4 areas of benchmarks. When people ask us, what does healthy stewardship look like? What does a stewardship church look like? We respond with these 4 components that are listed there. And so we've identified benchmarks to help assess each of these areas: theology, mission and vision, leadership, and then year-round action plan. So let's get a little bit more into these 4 areas now in the next slide. So here you see a graphic that has all 4 of those components. So one of the tools that we can offer and lead your church through is a stewardship health assessment that is a little bit broader than just stewardship, because we know that stewardship is that foundation of everything that's happening: mission, education, worship, all of that connects with stewardship. But we want to help you identify these components and see how they're being developed in your church. So the goal really is for you to see, hey, we really are good in this area. We're doing a lot. We feel really great about perhaps the theology of stewardship that's being discussed here, but maybe you've got room for improvement or growth in a different area that you haven't paid as much attention to. So we're going to help you focus the church's efforts in a meaningful way that will lead to positive change in people's mindsets about stewardship, as well as how they live that out, how they live as God's stewards. So we're going to briefly look at each of these 4 areas. I'm going to ask you some questions related to each one to invite you to think about how you would answer them for your church or your ministry context. I'll give you a sneak preview, which is that our goal is for you to be able to say yes to all these questions. So So that if there are some that you hear here in a minute and you think, no, for that one, those are the areas that we would want to help you with your stewardship ministry. So we're going to start with theology, because that should be at the heart of all that we do and say about stewardship. So think about the theology of stewardship at your church. Does your church spend time talking about a theology of stewardship? Do you ever publish a theology of stewardship in your bulletin or in other places? Does your pastor, if you are a pastor, talk about stewardship? Does your Christian education program discuss stewardship for children, young people, and adults? And is stewardship invited and celebrated through intentional offertory practices? The second area is ownership of mission and vision. What does that mean? Does your church have a mission or a vision? Is the church intentional about identifying the assets that you have that you use to support your mission and vision? If you say your mission is to grow disciples of Jesus, what assets do you have that help you accomplish that mission? Do you identify those and plug those in? Do you budget to your mission and vision? And do you help members directly connect their stewardship, their financial offerings, their gifts, time and talent with how the church is achieving that mission or vision? Narrative budgets are a really great tool to help as you think about mission and vision and how you make that bridge between stewardship and all that the church is doing related to mission and vision. The third piece that you'll see there at the bottom left is leadership. Do you have engaged leadership that are transparent about all aspects of stewardship? So here's some questions to consider. Do your church leaders agree on any kind of belief statement about stewardship for the church? And can they articulate that message? What does that mean? Oftentimes when we work with churches in stewardship, I'll ask the board, if I were to watch a movie of X Moravian church, of your church, what would I see that's stewardship? What would people tell me that stewardship is at the church? So when you take those steps to come up with a belief statement around stewardship, that's a process that we will work with you on. The end result is that your church can say, and your leaders can say something like this. At Agape Moravian Church, we recognize God as creator and owner of all. We rejoice because God loves us so much. He entrusts us with creation, and we grow in our relationship with him as we discern what would God have us do with all he entrusts to us. So that is the stewardship statement at Agape Moravian Church, to give it a name. And I bet if you went there on a Sunday or you talked to people from Agape, they would be able to articulate that to you. Maybe not word for word, but it's part of the culture of the congregation as they talk about stewardship. Here's another example. At Ex Moravian Church, we believe whatever resources we have or accumulate are gifts of God's grace and goodness. We are called to serve God through them and to help build the kingdom of God with them now and even beyond our lifetime. So again, this is a process of creating a stewardship belief statement that MMFA can help your church with, and it leads to people all understanding what does stewardship mean here. So when we get ready to think about how we are giving of different aspects of our life, we know what it means exactly for our ministry. So finally, the final area that I want to look at is the fourth blue piece, which is that year-round stewardship specifics. So what exactly does that mean? So there are three top bullet points there that I want you to think about. Again, stewardship is all that we do, is all we have all of the time. So it's time, it's talent, it's treasure, and testimony. Testimony is just a way to think about relationship building. How are you stewarding connections with the people in your congregation and talking to one another, sharing stories? This is what God wants for all of us as we're giving of what God has entrusted to us. So we want you to have an intentional plan, not just for inviting monetary gifts, but in all four of these areas. I'll give you a neat example of something that you could do to invite gifts of testimony. We had a church that created a giving wall, and they used this prompt: I give because ... And everybody got sticky notes, all different colors. People wrote, I give because blah, I give because, and they stuck them all up on this wall. So they had this beautiful rainbow colored wall with all of these short little statements about why people give. And they were able to walk around, read it, learn from one another, inspire one another. This was my favorite response that I got to read from that wall. I give to this church because I need to be reminded that my money is not who I am. I think that's a really powerful statement about generosity for the church. So this is just an easy way that you could invite gifts of testimony as part of your year-round plan. The second area to focus on as you're considering that year-round stewardship ministry is how do you ask thank, tell, and celebrate. You all may be familiar with Charles Lane. He's a pastor, a wonderful writer about stewardship. He has a great book called Ask, Thank, Tell. Highly recommend it. Help you get a copy of it if you need one. And in conversation several years after that book was published, he said, oh, I need to add celebrate. It's really important for our communities of faith to come together and celebrate the impact of our collective stewardship. Be reminded it's not just what I give, but what we give together that God is using in the world. We're oftentimes really good at inviting people to give, especially of their money. You have an offering during worship on Sunday probably, but we can sometimes fall short with thanking people, with sharing the good news of how gifts are being put to use to help the church accomplish its mission, or at celebrating. So those 4 parts of stewardship ministry are really important. MMFA can help you identify steps to take for each of those areas. And then the final thing I want to mention is 4 pockets of financial giving. Another great stewardship writer is Cliff Christopher. Years ago, it's been 15 actually, he published the book, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate. And he focused on 3 pockets. He has since also added a pocket. So now we've got 4. That first pocket, I know you're very familiar with. That's the annual giving, the tithes and the offerings that are supporting those ongoing day-to-day ministry needs at the church. So those are those fixed costs like your utilities, salaries, insurance, buildings and grounds, maintenance, upkeep, that kind of stuff. The second pocket of giving is capital giving. So that typically supports new construction or expanding or renovating a facility. And a lot of people cringe when they hear capital campaign, but you know capital giving is crucial, and there are people who are passionate about updating or upgrading facilities. So as you're thinking about year-round stewardship at your church, it could be time for you to think about capital giving in an intentional way. The third pocket of financial stewardship is special giving. So this is above and beyond people's regular contributions to areas that they care about. I'll give you an example of a church that we worked with recently. They need to restore its organ. This was actually an expense that they had some designated money set aside for from some planned gifts. But they invited the congregation to make a gift to support it as well, because they knew how important the music ministry was to the life of the church, and that they knew that there were people that would want to be generous and would want to give to ensure that that organ was playing for generations to come. So they did a special giving effort. It wasn't a capital campaign. It was above and beyond the regular, and people who wanted to were able to give for that special need. And then the final pocket I want to touch on is plan giving. That's the opportunity for people to support the ministry of your congregation beyond their lifetime, or to make a specific type of gift like a trust or an annuity, as Vince was mentioning earlier, with the tools of philanthropy. And MMFA can help your congregation in this area. We can lead an intentional gift planning effort, and those factor in the needs of the ministry, your hopes for the future, helps you educate people on the importance and benefits of gift planning, and then gives you tools and resources to keep plan giving in front of people year after year. So that is Stewardship Services in a nutshell. I should add that all of this is free. It's a free service of the foundation, so I would love to connect with you, talk more about what's going on at your church, and see how we can help form faithful stewards together. So back to you, Vince.
Thank you, Laura. And what a perfect lead in to our 4th area of service, which is gift planning. Most of the Moravians that are cherished and loyal in your church have given all of their lives to the church. And of course, they will want to give through planned giving or gift planning as well. So this 4th area of gift planning, I would like to talk about 3 different areas. The first is our Legacy Gift Planner, which is a free online legal document generator, which is fairly new. The second area is, again, using these tools of philanthropy to customize, align the donor's passions with their gifts, their generosity, and structure gifts that are meaningful and enhance the joy of their giving. And then the last thing I would like to talk about is the opportunity that you have to take advantage of learning more about gift planning through our boot camp pre-recorded series. So the Legacy Planner is new. It is free to anyone who plans to leave assets to a Moravian church or agency. It does not require an attorney. It produces actual documents that are ready to print out, collect your witnesses and a notary, sign them and file them. If you have a simple estate like I do, this may be all you need. If you have a trusted attorney, this is a great tool to help you organize your thoughts and prepare, produce something that is ready for review. The different kinds of documents that this tool can generate for you is, first of all, the last will and testament. And it does this by asking a series of questions, and you will interact and answer those questions, and it will compose the document in the background and have it ready. The second document that this can generate is your financial power of attorney. It can also produce an advanced healthcare directive, and it can help you generate letters of intent for the beneficiary charities that you are remembering in your will. And lastly, it produces a set of instructions, step by step, what you need to do once you've finished. Printing out how to collect witnesses, how to find a notary, how to file the documents in your state. And this will vary depending on where you are. Here's a great link that will take you directly to that to get started on your will. It's a great link for you to have as part of your own churches or agencies' communication on a website or newsletter or social media, just to remind people that it's easy and this free service is something available to them through the Moravian Ministries Foundation. When I made my will using this tool, I was surprised at how simple the steps were. Again, my estate is a simple estate, but many of us fall into that category. I got these instructions that have, it's literally 1, 2, 3, what to do. And I found it very helpful here. The documents, I got a PDF that I could print out and get my witnesses together, take and get it signed, and what to do with it to make sure it's filed properly. The next area I want to talk about are those tools of philanthropy. Now, philanthropy sounds like a fancy word for rich people maybe to you, but it's not just for rich people. It means the art of giving wisely. And there are various kinds of gift annuities, trust, donor-advised funds, and perpetual funds can help people of ordinary means. There are ways to take assets that are earning nothing for you now and turning them into a revenue stream now and benefit the church later. We have brochures you can make available to your members or call to schedule workshops. We also have a series of videos called Gift Planning Boot Camp that if you have people, maybe some designated trustees or people who have particular interest or in your church that might want to help, we have Gift Planning Boot Camp that's available as a pre-recorded series that would be great for study or viewing either alone or as part of a group. We will also be happy to come and speak or lead a group at your church if you're interested in having a group of people or nurturing a group of people to know more about the various types of gift planning tools. And there are some links, as I mentioned. We're going to send you this PowerPoint with these links in it, and most of them will be the same regardless of what organization you are representing. One of them will be unique, and that's the first one, the Give Now link, because I can send you the link that takes your audience directly to your donation form. It bypasses the giving portal, so they don't have to look or find your organization. So if you want that, I can send that link to you. Go ahead and have a look at your website, see if it's already there. But in addition to that giving portal link, there are also other links that it's great to have on your website, in your social media, newsletters, other electronic tools. And that is instructions, how to make a gift of real property to this church, or how to create your own will or other legal documents, who to contact to make a planned gift to this congregation. We have actually looked at most of the church websites, and these are only present in a handful of churches. And it would be a great idea for you to make sure that they're available so that you don't miss that opportunity on December 29th that we talked about earlier. And now we're going to move on to our fifth and final area of service. Laura is going to talk to us about grant funding for ministries.
Grant funding. MMFA's grant-making service awards grants from several different field of interest funds. You see a list there on your screen. These funds are seeking to address basic human needs, such as food, access to clean water, shelter, clothing, as well as caring for the earth and one another. The grant program is funded by the generosity of individuals who are passionate about these particular areas of need, as well as a portion of MMFA's net income each year. And then annually, we facilitate a grant cycle. We have a grant advisory committee, and they review the applications. They make recommendations for grant awards to our board of trustees. This grant advisory committee is comprised of Moravians from all over North America, as is our board of trustees. And then our trustees make the final determination on grant recipients, and we, the foundation, make those awards, and then we provide oversight. I want to give you an example of a neat organization that got a grant from our Environmental Stewardship Fund. It was Macedonia Moravian Church's preschool. They planted a pollinator garden for their preschooler kids to enjoy, and we had the pleasure of going out to see that shortly after it was planted, as well as when they had the fall celebration of the garden the first year that it was thriving. And it was really neat to see all these 3- and 4-year-olds running around and telling their parents about the butterflies and getting to see some of those native pollinators at work doing what they needed to do to care for our environment. So that's just one example of a project. If you go to our website, you can see all kinds of grant recipient stories. Some of those will probably inspire you. You may think, hey, we've got a similar project going on here at our church. You may not realize that there were some grant opportunities available, and our 2023 cycle is about to begin. So let's look at some key dates on the next slide. So the first step, if you're thinking about a grant application, is to have a consultation. Those are going to begin on May 15th. Ainsley Davis is our intern who will be with us again this summer. So she conducts those over the phone or on Zoom. And it's just a quick chance for you to tell her a little bit about the project that you're thinking about applying for a grant for, and she can tell you more about which of our funds is the best fit if you're not sure, and then give you more information in terms of what makes a grant application its best, its most successful. And then she, after that consultation, will send the grant application to you for you to complete. You'll see that those applications are going to be due by June the 15th. And then we will notify you of grant decisions by July 27th. We give our grant advisory committee plenty of time to make those reviews and then send those recommendations to our board for approval. And then we will announce all of our grant awards on July the 28th. So I encourage you, if you do nothing else today as a result of this webinar, to be thinking about all of the needs that you are aware of in your neighborhood, that your church is involved with, in trying to meet through its various ministries and missions. And we know God is calling us to respond to those needs. So we hope that you will answer and possibly answer by applying for a grant from MMFA. If you have any questions about our grant making service, the upcoming cycle, I would be happy to connect with you before Ainsley starts with us in early May. So please feel free to send an email or a phone call my way if you've got questions about grants, as well as put them in the chat and we can talk about them right now. I'll turn it back over to Chris, I think.
All right, great. We have about 9 minutes left before the top of the hour. So does anybody have any questions? You can just unmute yourself and ask us or type it in the chat. We've got a few minutes left to take questions. We have some of the best jobs in the world being able to work for your foundation, but we also recognize part of our responsibility is making your job as a church board member easier. So, please.
Chris, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Cynthia.
King Moravian, this is a little bit off from what y'all have discussed, and I appreciate all your discussion. It was very good. Do you have any options other than through your website for actually contributing, like using a QR code or, well, in other words, we're looking for alternative ways for folks to donate versus writing a check, giving cash, doing it through online, through your service. Have any suggestions, or do y'all have any?
Yeah, Vince can help you actually with a QR code. He could give you a QR code that would take the donor to the King Moravian, in your case, Cynthia page, giving portal page for those donations. He could also help you establish that QR code going to something else, or we have the software to do that and help churches with that. So Vince, I'm going to volunteer you to help with that.
Yes. Yes, it is a part of our system that can generate a QR code for your existing donation page. So, let's take it offline. Give me my contact information is right here on this slide. And I'll be emailing you in the next 24 hours as well with copies of this PowerPoint. And you can just respond back to me and we will get that going.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Cynthia, one of the things we didn't talk about, we touched on a little bit, but we would be more than willing to draft newsletter articles for you, a short paragraph for a church bulletin, whatever is appropriate, to talk about the other ways to give. We could, elaborate on the gift planning tools, but one of the best ways for somebody, above 70 and a half is to do a qualified charitable distribution from their IRA to support causes for the church. So we didn't talk about that today, but we can certainly do things for the churches that help you explain that, make it easy. What Vince talked about with our gift facilitation too, donors can donate stock. We do all that for the churches, but sometimes it's helping members understand how to do that and then having the information to make those gifts. So we help with that, and reach out to us anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? If not, please respond to the survey. Give us your ideas for future webinars. And I want to thank each and every one of you for giving us your time today and listening to us and finding out more about the services of the foundation. Hopefully you found something helpful that will help you at your church with the larger board. So thank you for your time. I hope everyone has a blessed spring and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for attending.
Bye.